and I'm being very general here, but I really believe that the strongest men that exist in the world thought they were going to die at some point. And I think that a rite of passage should be something that is just scares the fuck out of you.
Put it on the
on Zoom.
Yeah. You're still on Zoom.
On Zoom. All right.
No, I'm saying you got to do the live version, right?
No, we're good. We're good. It's on Zoom. We're good.
No, you do the live to do the introduction is what I'm saying.
Oh, that's what. See how we're polished. We're so you want me to do live and then go to Zoom?
That's what we've been doing.
All right, here we go.
Fucking saying that.
I love you, brother.
You're fucking talking to me.
Welcome to the Building Men podcast. Building Men, become the strongest version of yourself, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. We had a little shit show there.
I'm sweating. I'm sweating already. I'm fucking sweating.
You have swamp ass already. We didn't start recording the show. So we wanted to introduce the Building Men audience. We are totally honored to have Mike Bledsoe as a guest. I just mentioned to Mike, we were just getting acquainted really quickly. I called him the Thomas Edison of personal development. He's been through many different journeys, and Mike, more than anything else, is a personal development coach. He helps people become a better version of themselves than they ever thought possible. He's working right now with a strong coach. And Mike Bledsoe, welcome to the Building Men podcast, my man. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm always stoked to talk about how to make men better, and I'm always getting better as a man myself and finding where I can make improvements. So I'm a student. I'm 100% student, but I've also got a lot of lessons I could pass down.
Yeah, and we've learned a lot about you over the last couple days, especially, going on a deep dive in your life. You were brought to my attention by Mark England as I introduced him. I interviewed him on the Building Men podcast. He was talking to me about his work with you, and you called him a one-trick pony. He said, yeah, that's all he did was he worked on words, and he said he took it as a badge of honor. So I tell my brother, I'm like, we're going to get introduced to Mike Bledsoe, and I'll tell you what it was like. It would be like talking to a teenage girl about, One Direction 10 years ago. He got a chub in his pants when he heard we were going to be able to talk to you.
No. Stop it.
Why are you sitting like that then? I mean,
I'm not. What are you saying?
I can tell something's going on in your crotchal area right now.
It's all good.
So we appreciate you being on the show, and we're really interested to first do a deep dive into just how you got to where you are. I mean, your journey went on a million different career paths. You've had to reinvent yourself a million times over the last how many years. And one thing that we're really interested here in Building Men is people that have had to rebuild, that have had to come to terms with a difficult situation. Some people fold their cards in, and some people sack up and they're like, you know what, I'm going to keep going, or I'm going to reinvent, or I'm going to move on. And you've done that so many times. That's why it's amazing that you're here on the podcast. So start talking to us a little bit, Mike, about your experience growing up. So you were homeschooled, right? So how was that experience as you were growing up being homeschooled?
Yeah, I look at being homeschooled. The older I get, the more I understand what a gift that was. And you know what? I did my homework between 8 and noon most days, all the way from when I was a little kid to high school. I did about 4 hours of work, and then the rest of the day was mine. And my parents were amazing. I got to choose my curriculum to a degree. There was definitely things that were non-negotiables, and I got to study some things that other people just didn't get to study. And when I got to where I was more academically advanced than my parents, they just hired tutors for me. So it was, and we were not wealthy. This was, this is all done on shoestring budgets and all that kind of stuff. So it was, I would say that the thing that I can look at being homeschooled as creating the most value in my life is I learned how to structure my day. And that sounds like maybe such a mundane thing to be good at, but I find that a lot of people who get into entrepreneurship specifically, they leave their job, and then the idea of having to create their own structure is completely foreign to them. You know, the average person, they know they got to be at school at 7, 8, 9 a.m. whenever it is, and then they got to be at this class at this time, and this class at this time. We got lunch at this time, and then you get off at 3, but you got to fit in this homework, and you got practice, and you got all this. They fill your schedule, and then you get to college, and then you get a little bit more freedom there, and then you get a corporate job, and they're going to tell you when and where to be and all that stuff. And so the amount of I don't think people really appreciate how much structure they've been given, and they've never had to create their own until they become an entrepreneur. And then it's like, what am I supposed to do with my time? And then there's not enough of it. And it's usually due to a lack of structure. And the just being able to structure is one thing, but what I find is it becomes confusing. The thing that it's really easy to be like, oh yeah, just structure your day, get out your calendar, all that stuff. None of your structure that you're going to make up has any meaning, and is going to be very difficult to implement if you have no vision and you don't know where you're going and why you're going there. And so having a vision for our own lives is something that's also not taught. It's not practiced. And so when people get out on their own, they have to learn how to create their own vision for their life and to create a structure around to support. And for me, being homeschooled, I really got to daydream a little more, I guess you could say. And I had a lot more space, and that space in my schedule allowed me to visualize what I wanted to be different in the future and practice that. When I was a kid, I'd be off school at noon, and my mom would actually get nervous. She thought, cops were going to pick me up if I'm outside doing something. It's 1 p.m. They think I'm supposed to be in school. But I went out and got jobs. I went and did dumb stuff out in the fields. I burned down a couple fields, got in some trouble. It was a blast. And
not only the structure, I mean, you need to learn at a young age. You need to be smart when you're doing the stupid shit. That's one of those lessons you probably learned as well. Be smart when you're doing the stupid shit.
Yeah. My dad was a bit of a daredevil, and he encouraged the same thing out of his sons. So yeah, we learned. That's another thing that I don't think a lot of kids learn these days, or a lot of people my age. I'm 39. A lot of people my age, they expect things to be safe. They expect things to have guardrails and let's shave off the sharp edges of all this. And it's really obvious when I go to other countries with people. I'll go to South America with people, and they're like texting and crossing the street. I'm like, hey, you're not in LA. People don't give a shit about pedestrians here.
Exactly.
Like, you gotta keep your head on a swivel, all right?
Yeah, we tamped down. We're not letting kids, and as an educator myself, I know we weren't letting kids fail, or we're not letting kids experience hardships. To your point, you're going to learn not to fucking walk and text when you get hit by a car, right? You're going to learn not to, do this or that, because you're going to experience the shit that comes along with it. But when we're just telling kids, don't do this, it's no good. You need to have that experience of going through failing and fucking up a little bit, and then you learn from it.
Yeah, pain is the teacher. No one wants it, and I say that because I categorize and define learning as behavior change. If your behavior didn't change, you actually didn't learn it. And I like to use that definition because people have been rewarded with grades for being able to regurgitate information, but having not actually learned it, not actually changing behavior or having practical application.
Man, I could go on a whole diatribe about grades. I don't believe in grades. I just assigning a numeric value to some arbitrary task, right? And who decides what it is anyway?
Yeah, it's crazy. I've studied education a lot, and it's very interesting to me. Probably because I was responsible for my own education for so long, and then I watch other people, and they're like, "Man, you're always learning all sorts of stuff." I go, "Yeah, like, aren't you always learning?" And I realize people just aren't paying attention. Um, but like, there are methods for learning math that weren't available 10, 20 years ago. That like you've heard of Khan Academy, I'm sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dude, what an amazing, like if I had that to learn math growing up, I would have been probably studying astrophysics by the time I was in the 8th or ninth grade, you know. It's gamified, it's interesting. I know in Brazil they just implemented a process where when you're doing math problems, if you miss two questions in a row or something like that, then what they do, they dumb it down a little bit for you. And so what they do is they help put you in flow state as you're practicing doing math problems. And so they make it challenging, but not so challenging that you just feel like a complete failure. And so now we have these methods for teaching where, yeah, for me it's like, what can you demonstrate success, and that's the lesson. Yeah, the standardization of education right now it's crazy.
Yeah, the idea too of being homeschooled, and as you're going through this journey, you're in charge of your education. Obviously, there's a curriculum that your parents and then the tutors have to follow. But a lot of education, from my experience, has been what can you do within a learning environment, a community. Like I've always believed that you learn within this community. So being left to your own devices, did you learn from, or one, I'll ask, do you feel like there was a lack of relationship in your life? Like, was there a lack of, peer relationship being homeschooled?
I definitely had less. Um, and I think I've always, I think people would say the opposite now. I mean, I'm mature, and I was always like one of the more mature kids. Um, I'm definitely very playful now. I'm probably more childlike at 39 than I was at 19. But the I would say the majority of my interactions were either taking care of my younger siblings or communicating with adults. And so I would be with my peer group, people of my own age, maybe once or twice a week, like group tutoring sessions. I would interact with them for an hour or two. I would go to church on Wednesday nights. I would go to church on Sundays. So I was getting a few hours here and there, not nearly the volume of interactions as someone who would get at school. But I recognized that I was going to work with my dad when I was 12, 13 years old. We would go to a job site. We were writing up contracts. He was teaching me how to interact with customers. And, I interacted with a lot of adults, and there was definitely things about my childhood where I feel like I grew up a little fast, and that I didn't have like that, where I didn't have that playground time and stuff like that. But I do value that. I recognize that as I was growing up, I could communicate with adults way better. So by the time I was, going into the Navy, my relationship to people and my maturity was pretty high.
And I would argue that the education that you got as a 12, 13-year-old working with your old man was far superior to anybody sitting in a classroom staring at a board for 7 or 8 hours a day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
being in a classroom for 8 hours in a day for a child just doesn't make. I don't like that as an adult.
Right.
I think I've maybe spent 5 hours in my office and then I'll quit.
Yeah.
I'll go back outside.
We definitely
I
have
don't
that.
Have the attention span. Yeah, I can't fucking do that. We literally had to run around outside for a little bit, but
we have that in common with you. Our old man he's a painter. He's a contractor. We went to work at an early age for him, learning that like blue collar hard work, you roll up your sleeves kind of thing. But we also learned the value of that social interaction. So Mike, before we get into, how you transition from there to the Navy, I'm curious about one thing that I've really loved to learn about is masculine rites of passage, where historically, like think back into the days of, the tribal sense where the fucking tribe elders would come and grab the boys out of the tribe and they would go and kill a lion and chant around a fire and come back and they were men. Now it doesn't. There's this like perpetual state of adolescence.
30-year-old boys living at home, never having that rite of passage, and not really having that moment where they transition.
Yeah, they're sitting at home jerking off all day, and they're not. They don't become men. So being homeschooled and working with your dad and seeing that, what would you consider to be rites of passage that you felt like you went through before you got to the Navy? You're like, you know what? I feel like I've kind of come of age a little bit and become a man a little bit in my father's eyes.
Hunting. I hunted from a really young age, but I definitely was given a lot more leeway, and I go out hunting on my own and things like that. Working, looking at a job site. I grew up in contracting as well, and when I was 15, my dad goes. He was always paying me by the hour. I was making 10 or 12 bucks an hour. He goes, how much are you going to charge me to strip that roof and re-roof it? And I would go, huh. And he was teaching me, how to create value in other ways versus just, trading dollars for hours. And I go, yeah, I'll do it for 500 bucks. That sounds like a good amount. And he immediately shakes my hand and says, deal. And that's when I knew I screwed up. There's no negotiating. I started way too low. And then, 4 days into the job thinking I was going to get done in 2, I learned a lot of lessons there. I think being around on the job site and just, watching my dad, kick some of the other guys' asses, not physically, but the guys showing up late, him getting on to them, watching those interactions, letting me be a part of they're cussing each other out type of thing is it's like, hey, and the other guy getting upset, my dad putting him in his place. I'm like, okay, cool. Like this, but also having compassion at the same time. I don't think there was this, I never had, before going in the Navy, I never had this big rite of passage where all right, we're going to do this so that now you're a man. And I do wish I had that because I see how I've done that on my own since then. Yeah. And the military being a part of that. But, I think my dad did a very good job of being a great example. And that really set me up for success in a lot of ways. But I did not get that, all right, now you're a man type of thing. I mean, when I turned 15, another thing my parents did, they sat me down and said, you have no curfew. There's no more house rules for you. You do whatever you want. If we haven't taught you how to do it right by now, then there's nothing else for us to teach you. You're good. And if you screw up and you end up in jail, then, that's on you. We're not going to come bail you out. So I was like, okay. And I went out and stayed out way too late and did all sorts of stuff for a few months. And then by the time I was 16 and I had a driver's license, I'd gotten out of my system.
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned that, Mike. Like I mentioned, I'm 44, my brother's 30. We grew up with the same biological set of parents, but they were totally different people from when I was growing up to when he was growing up. I look back on my experience, right? Like the shit that I was not able to get away with. Like I was kind of clamped down. You ran the show.
I did everything. Yeah, it didn't make a difference. I had no rules.
I'm the oldest of 5, and the difference between me and the youngest is 11 years. Yeah, they get away with murder. I had all this strict stuff until I was 15. But then, the stuff I think parents just get tired, man.
So fucking tired.
The first child, what I've witnessed is parents are so freaked out they're gonna screw them up, they overdo it, and then by the time they get to the last one, they underdo it.
Or they say the older one, just fucking take care of him.
Yeah, you do that. You know what to do. You're good. You're
Mike,
a good kid.
Take care of the younger too.
I can take care of this. Yeah.
It's so funny you mentioned with the stripping the roof and shit. Your father could have told you, Mike, here's how you price out this job, and this is how you bill for the. Or he's like, what would you charge? You learned such a deeper lesson from him just being like, what do you think, kid? And you fucked it up, but you learn more from that lesson.
Asking the questions, right?
Exactly. What a great parenting fucking move. Plus, he saved a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, also, I had plenty of opportunity to learn how to price a job out before then. I just wasn't paying attention.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, like I could have been looking over his shoulder. I could have been a better listener. Like, it's not like he didn't show me, but he didn't say, we're going to do this so you can do this now. And that did it taught me to pay attention. I could have done the math. I could have sat there instead of just ballparking it out of my head there in the moment. And that was a real gift.
You talk a lot about how, as especially a son being born, like these formative years between, from you're born until, maybe first, second, third grade, something like that, the propensity to like gravitate towards the mother figure, the feminine figure, because of their nurturing ability. And then from that point, hopefully there's a masculine role that steps in your life. So talk to us a little bit about like where you came up with that idea, like what that means to you, like how your mom plays a role in your life and then your father plays a role in your life.
Yeah. So, man, a few different things. One is I did a program where I did a lot of like emotional healing work around the ages of 0 and 7 for myself. And in that program, I learned there's this concept that our mother teaches us, and we learn from our mother. I got to be careful about this because what we learn and what they teach are different. So, and the truth is we learn from our parents. They may try to teach us something, but it may not get through. And what we learn from our mother is how to relate to ourselves, because when we come out of the womb and then we come and nurse at her breast, hopefully that's how that works. The connection, you come from inside of her, and then you suckle to her. In your consciousness, you are your mother and your mother is you. There is no separation. There's this incredible bond. And what you learn from your mother is how to relate to yourself, how to treat yourself. And then your father is typically your first love. It's the first person outside of yourself that you want to experience love from. And so your father ends up representing the world. And whatever you learn from your father is how the world is. However my father is. And it's so funny because once we have this framework and we start talking to people, we're like, holy shit. Like you think that everyone's always out to get you. How's your relationship with your dad? And pretty soon it's like, well, my dad was a real dick. Like he screwed me over. And I'm going, yeah, it makes sense. And these are really deep-seated wounds. And so like, I find that relationship to what we learn from our parents. But now, as far as having and I imagine that not even being able to tell the difference between ourselves and our mother at a young age causes us to be way more connected to her than our father, because he's the world and I'm my mother. And then when we look at other cultures, when we look at tribal cultures, when we look at cultures where they still have really old traditions running, it's very, very common for the young boys to really hang back at the hut with their mom, and they nurse till they're like 5 a lot of times, and they're participating in the gathering part of the hunting and gathering. They're around more women and other children, and then around the ages of like 9-10 years old is when a lot of rites of passage happen. I'd say probably between the ages of 9 and 13, depending on the culture. So American culture is like a lot of this whole "you're an adult when you're 18" thing. Man, that's really fucking old. Yep. When you look at history. Like most cultures see you as an adult when you hit puberty. Like you become an adult. So the they have these rites of passage. And what part of what happens is leading up to the rites of passage and after rites of passage is you're ripped from your mother and you now go spend time with your dad. And now you go from, being back at home with your mom and now you're going hunting with your dad for days at a time and all that. And that transition is can be really transformative. And yeah, that's just what I've noticed by looking at a lot of different cultures. That's pretty much just how it works.
And I'm sure a lot of the work that you do around helping people deal with trauma, it could be that they never had the mother figure in their life to identify with a sense of self, or conversely, their father wasn't around, more likely, and they had this extended state of, being with their mom and, being more, connected there, where they didn't get that sense of the outside world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, even if your parents weren't present, I mean, there's abandonment. You learn to, if your mother abandoned you, then you'll abandon yourself. And if your father abandoned you, you'll always, people in your life will abandon you. You'll choose relationships where that's going to happen. And the abandonment may just be emotional, may not be physical. But we have a story that we believe about the world, and then we're a character in it, and we have to follow the script that was written when we were a kid, because the ego, it hates to be wrong. And so in order to be right, we make sure that this is how the world operates. And it's a subconscious thing. People may hear that and go, nah, that's not me. I'm like, yeah, it is.
We do it without even thinking.
Totally subconscious.
And it's so funny when you mention that, because I'm just thinking about our relationship with our parents, and like it's almost like the thought of like knowing that my mother is going to love me, like that's already like locked in, right? I know that she loves me. It's like that love is there. And with our father, at least from my experience, I felt like I needed to do my whole song and dance for him all the time. Like I was constantly performing to gain his approval my entire life. So growing up, that's all that I did. And if I didn't get that affirmation at the end of the day, I felt like I fucked up. I wasn't good enough, right? I didn't, and so like I would feel neglected, and then I go to my mother because I knew she loved me, no matter what, she loved me, and it literally just lines up perfectly in sync with what you're saying. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. My mom thought I was. I felt like I was my mom's favorite, and I felt like my little brother was my dad's favorite, and it really highlights how I operate. Like I'll be really, I'll have like a relatively high self-esteem when I'm by myself, and then when I get around other people, I feel like I need to like be showing them something in order to earn their love, and that's definitely how I operated for a while.
And you mentioned like that rites of passage thing, and you said if you had an opportunity to go back, there would be certain things that you wish you had an opportunity to go through as a young man before you got to the Navy. If you were to kind of create a program or a course, what would be certain things that young men should experience or go through in those formative years?
Well, let's pick an age. What age are we talking here?
Let's say like that, like, you're just starting high school, that like 13, 14, 15-year-old age.
Yeah. I would, and I'm gonna have kids one day, so I'm gonna do some of these things, or at least I think I'm going to, and then I'll grow and change by then. But what I would do now, what I would have really appreciated is there to be an intentional time set aside for this is the purpose of what we're doing. I was included in things that men were doing, but it wasn't like we're doing this for you. And I think that something in the wilderness for days at a time. Hunting is something that I think being able to find and kill your own food and then prepare it. There's something really beautiful about changing your relationship to food, because most kids are they're just given food all the time. It ends up on their plate, and they don't know where it comes from, and they don't know how to get it themselves. And so something like that, and something that's really physically arduous. I'm being very general here, but I really believe that the strongest men that exist in the world thought they were going to die at some point. And I think that a rite of passage should be something that is just scares the fuck out of you. And there are rites of passage where that happens. It's extremely painful. They scare the fuck out of you. There's one tribe where you stick your hand in like basically like a hornet's nest, and you got to have your entire hand stung. There's a tribe where they eat iboga, which is this root bark down in Africa, that puts them on a 72-hour psychedelic trip where they run them through they do that and then go through a physical thing. Anyone who's done iboga can't even imagine, walking after taking the substance. Um, there are there are for me, like most people, I have this desire to be like, all right, this is what's palatable: hunting, and getting out in the wilderness and doing something that's really physically arduous. My boys, they're gonna think they're dead. Like they're gonna go through like some type of death process, and it'll probably be a combination of really something that's very difficult physically, and psychedelics, and maybe not combine the two of those at the same time, but we may go on a very deep mushroom experience, and then the next day we're in a sweat lodge. And I don't know if you guys have done a sweat lodge before, but if you're not familiar, and most boys aren't familiar with pushing the edge of like passing out from heat, it'll happen there. You'll wanna. I've been in sweat lodges where I'm shoulder to shoulder with people, and I'm curled up in a ball just to make room, and it's so hot, and I'm just breathing, and there's a part of me that goes, just freak out, man. Just fucking freak out and say, I got to get the fuck out of here right now. And it's like, no, stay calm. Just breathe. Just breathe. I know it. Like if you have claustrophobia, that shit will go away in a sweat lodge. And it's hot and it's uncomfortable. So these are tools. I don't know exactly which tool I will use with my kids in the future, but these are the things that I have at my disposal now. I'd probably take them on a big mushroom trip, sweat lodge, take them on another mushroom trip, or maybe we'd go down to South America and do ayahuasca. When I've done ayahuasca, there several times I've had a complete ego death, dissolution. I thought the shamans had poisoned me and that I was a goner for sure. And then on the other side of that was deep realizations about who I was, and the world after that was very different. So I think a rite of passage should create an experience where the boy visually, like, it looks different than it did the day before.
The closest thing that we've come to a sweat lodge is working with our old man in a 2-bedroom apartment in the middle of summer in Jersey, and it's 115 degrees, and we're sweating and crying and working for 12 hours. Probably the labor laws were, it was against the law in some way. Plus, what you're doing is probably going to be against the law, but we're not going to tell anybody about that. Keep that between us.
Well, here's the thing is I go south of the border for most things. I'm a big fan of hitting Mexico, Costa Rica, Colombia. Like the older I get, the more I'm like, you know what? America doesn't like this stuff, and the South Americans, they do it way better. So I'll just go there.
Yeah. Figure out where it's going to fit.
Yeah.
Perfect. So now, we've gone through this journey of your experience and what your anticipate your experience is going to be with your own children. So now you're in this spot where you're leaving high school and you decide to join the armed forces. So that's something where you mentioned the Navy a few times, and so you go through BUDS. And so talk to us a little bit about what that experience was like, because there was a medical thing that happened, and now you're starting on this journey of having to reinvent yourself a couple different times. So walk us through just quickly about how that experience was like going through the BUDS training.
Oh man. I had no plan B. There was only plan A. Like, I was gonna be a Navy SEAL or nothing. And I got 3 days in the Hell Week, and they wanted to performance roll me, wanted me to start over because I couldn't keep up with the class. It was due to an injury, and which I was hiding, and then from there I go, you know what? I quit, and I was 19 years old at the time, and it was just the craziest, most surreal thing because I couldn't imagine having those words come out of my mouth. It just it was beyond me, and in that moment of the biggest failure of my life, because I had never really failed at anything before. You know, I had struggled a bit, but I never really wanted something more than that, and then failed at it. And so, yeah, I remember calling my parents and my mom being relieved that I had failed, but at the same time, like just feeling a lot of shame around it. And it was, the plan was to go back. I go, you know what? You can come back in 2 years. I can get in better shape, all that stuff. A lot of guys that make it through the program, it's their second or third time through, actually. And 19 is pretty young to go into that program. I didn't know that until, after I was there. I was like, oh, these guys are 27.
Right.
Okay. Um, and there's definitely a difference. I was not a full grown man, that's for sure. And yeah, it was, and I got sent to the fleet after that. And then within 2 weeks of getting to the fleet, I was on a deployment. So I went on my first deployment, just pissed at the world, pissed. I was angry. I was not a friendly person to be around. I feel bad for the people who had to endure uh, my attitude for that 6 months, but it happened.
And so going through that experience now, where first I just want to unpack a little bit, like going and having to tell your mom, your dad, people that you knew that you're like, I'm going and I'm going to do this, and then having to come back and say, I left, I didn't finish it. What was that like? I mean, knowing just you for a short period of time now, that must have been like, fuck, like I have to go and say I wasn't able to do it. I put myself in your shoes, having to tell, especially my old man, that I wasn't successful in it. That must have been one of the most challenging things in your life.
Yeah, I would say I it it wasn't as hard to tell my parents as like knowing that the rest of the community was gonna find out. And it was I remember I went home. I did a deployment, and then I went home like a year after I had my failure. And I was walking around, and people knew that I what I went in to do, and knew that I didn't make it. And a lot of people were like, are you gonna go back? And they're like asking me questions about it, and I was just like, I don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I really felt, yeah, I just felt like a failure. Felt the shame of that, and I carried that shame until I was about 30 years old. And I tried to go back, but you don't always get to choose what you
Right.
do in the military, right? They own you in a way.
And you mentioned the word failure. I believe wholeheartedly, if like failure is in that moment, you could rewrite the script on failure. Where at that moment you're like, man, I failed at this, but you succeeded in becoming who you are today based on that experience that you went through. You would not be doing what you're doing, inspiring like millions of people because what was perceived as a failure at that moment.
Yeah, I've since then been able to really appreciate that whole experience, and happy that it happened, and that I definitely wouldn't be where I am now if that were the case. In fact, I just got done working with some military veterans who had spent a lot more time in than I had, who had PTSD and things like that, and watching how being in the military that long and experiencing that much combat, how that's impacted them. I'm really have a lot of gratitude because I know that my life is a lot fuller than a lot of those guys. So yeah, it's interesting.
So walk us through. So now after you're done with the military, and I don't want to gloss over any of that experience,
Hmm.
obviously, but
That's fun.
from that point until you get into the barbell shrugged world, like walk us through a little bit of that journey. Like, what did that look like going from leaving the military to getting into the personal development and CrossFit space?
Yeah. So I, well, well, first off, I read a book called The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand when I was in the Navy, and that is what really that's where I found out that I was supposed to do something more and something different, and that's why I got out. I did really well when I was in the military. I advanced in rank faster than anyone I knew. When I got out, everyone I knew was like, "What the hell are you doing? You're so successful," so on and so forth. But I knew that there was like there's I read this book and about this guy who went against cultural norms and really did the thing, and he followed his own conscience, and I was just like, that's me. I have that feeling inside of me that I'm supposed to do something else and something different and something more. And I'm tired of people telling me what to do. I want to have freedom. And but I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get out. I'll go to school. I'll get a business degree because, business can't hurt, like at least you figure out a way to make money. So I go to business school. I hate it. I hated it. I dropped my accounting class. It was difficult. I was going to fail it. That's why I dropped it. And then I, uh, I go, I'm looking through the syllabus. I'm looking, not syllabus or whatever it is. I'm going through the catalog at the school, and I go, "Oh, exercise, sports science. I love exercise. Let's go do that." And I'll just use my GI Bill and do that. So I got into that program, loved it. Got introduced to the sport of weightlifting, loved that. And then one of my Navy buddies, he's a SEAL. He comes and visits me for Christmas, and he introduces me to this CrossFit thing, and I saw him do the CrossFit thing, and I go, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And then 6 months later, I'm like, you know what, maybe I'll give it a shot. And I do it, and I go, oh shit, people are gonna love this. This is actually a lot of fun. Like I'd been so rigid in my training from I started like bodybuilding type training when I was 15. I was like a running, swimming, and bodybuilding till from like 15 to 24. And then I run into this weightlifting thing, and I'm like, holy shit, it's amazing. But I'm like, yeah, this is you have to be uh, kind of crazy to really love that. But then when I saw CrossFit, I go, this is gonna catch on. I got to find the CrossFit gym. I need to find the CrossFit. This is 2007. Because when I do the wads on the that are on the blog, I blow everyone out of the water when it comes to the weightlifting portions. I can deadlift, squat, press, snatch, clean and jerk. I was a beast. I was like 175 pounds, and I was able to do like elite numbers at the time because I was a weightlifter. I was like, yeah, man, I just should go like teach at the local gym. There's got to be one. No gym at all, so I go gonna open it. I'm just gonna open a gym, open that up in the fall of 2007, and man, I really sucked. I really sucked at being a business owner. Um, I made almost no money. I was using my GI Bill money to fund my business. I was living in my gym. I had threw a mattress above my office in a crawl space. It was like 4 feet. It was, by the way, I never got a business permit. I never asked code enforcement to come by. I never did anything. I tend to live my life in a way. I'm like, you know what? If I'm supposed to have it, they'll come let me know. And like otherwise, I'm a free man. I'm gonna do whatever I want, and so no one's gonna tell me what I can't do. So I remember I just ignored it. But if I look back and I'm like, if code enforcement ever came by, that operation had been shut down. That building was about to fall over. It was terrible, and I'm living in it. So I a year and a half in, I break down. I started looking at jobs at AutoZone, and that's when I was like, dude, I got a degree. I got military experience, and I'm looking at an AutoZone job that's $10 an hour. Uh, and I own a business. Well, what if I just learned how to do business? It's like, and I had this really negative connotation with like financials, marketing, all this stuff because my dad was actually terrible at that. So I watched my dad suffer because he was really bad at the accounting and he was really bad at marketing. He was good. He was a craftsman. He was great at everything else. But I learned from him to despise people who did that, and I didn't want to despise myself. So, interesting thing happened. I think it'll be very interesting for your audience. Is uh, it was December of 2008. I decided I'm going to take my business more seriously. I'm going to bring in a business partner, and I'm going to start studying business. 1 month later, in January, my father kills himself. So he commits suicide,
Oh my God.
and it was devastating. I didn't see it coming. I got a call at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning to let me know. I had to handle everything. I had to close his business. I had to close up contracts. No one else in my family really participated in that. I managed the insurance, and I was on this like I went into mission mode, and I did that, and then at the funeral, I finally, expressed my grief in some ways. And then I would just go to my gym for the month after that and just fucking sit in my office and not do shit. And the guy who had come in, which is Doug Larson, if you watch Shrugged, you know him. He's the one that came in to be my business partner. He pretty much ran the business. He was on a flight from Australia to the U.S. when it happened. And so he basically arrived and ran the business for a month, and I was just not with it. But a month after that, I go, you know what? I'm gonna start working, and I started studying business. And I think that with the passing of my father, it really gave me the permission to be okay with marketing, being okay with managing numbers and all that, because I was running my business to impress him subconsciously. And I ran my business the way he would run his business because I wanted him to be proud of me. And so once he passed, I can look back and I go, wow, a lot of things in my life changed because there was no longer a father to impress, and the only person I need to impress now is me.
That's
And
a
so that was like a really beautiful process, and that was that was January 2010, and then by or 2009, January 2009. By 2010, the gym was making plenty of money, and we moved to a facility that wasn't nearly as broken down. I got married. I moved into a house. Um, I did a lot of things, and this is before Shrugged, and I started a couple businesses between opening the business in 2007 and starting Shrugged in 2012. Um, I've always had this interest in being innovative, trying to start other businesses. I had a couple of businesses that didn't take off. It was like one business, one invention didn't take off in that 5 year period. And then when podcasting came along, I connected some dots and I recognized, I go, oh yeah, no one's doing a show about strength and conditioning that's targeted at CrossFitters, and I think we could do it really well. And so we started recording.
And I don't want to gloss over that, the experience that you had with your father and his passing. I want to just, offer my condolences to you and to your family. I'm sure that was traumatic in a million different ways. But to take that devastating experience and to rewrite the script in your mind, giving yourself permission to kind of grow from that experience. A lot of people wouldn't have the courage to do that. So I just want to acknowledge that the way that you were able to shift and change, rebuild from that spot. I mean, it's a remarkable feat to be able to go through that and to come out on the other side in a better spot than you were before.
Thank you. Yeah, and what's funny is it's interesting. I I felt as though I was complete around my father until I went down to Peru in 2015 and did ayahuasca, and that it was that medicine that allowed me to actually become complete with something in which I thought I was complete, and then I got a whole other level to that healing.
Like to come to terms with shit that you had gone through with your father growing up.
Um, yeah, I got to relive all the good times. I got to see all the things I didn't like. I got to see them in different scenes, and then I also got to experience what my father experienced before he took his life. I got to experience what it was like to be hopeless and the level of pain that he was in. And I think that's one of the things when someone close to you commits suicide is there's this haunting question that can exist, which is why did they do it? And especially if they don't tell you before they do it.
Right.
And so in that experience, I was able to be him when it happened and feel what he was feeling and understand the level of hopelessness and despair that he was in. And then all of a sudden, his suicide made sense. And after having that feeling and it making sense, I was able to say goodbye to him, and he said goodbye, and I love you, and we separated ways in that experience, and it was, yeah. I mean, I think you can imagine what kind of impact that had on me.
And Mike, I appreciate you telling us that. And I would just follow up with, if you were coaching someone, or helping someone along through that process that just experienced the death of a loved one via suicide, what advice would you give to that person based on your experience? How would you help someone else as a coach deal with that situation?
Different people respond in different ways, and the way I coach is very situational. One of the things that I really try to get people to move away from is the unanswerable questions. Like the one is, why did they do it? That seems to be the primary one. Or why did this happen? And getting to a place of like, it happened because it happened. And really being able to, because anytime we're asking unanswerable questions, we're trying to avoid reality. And the quickest way to move through a healing process, and the only way to move through a healing process, is to get present with the reality of what is. And those questions are just a distraction, really, because they can't be answered. They really can't be answered.
Right.
And that's I watch people torment themselves with that question, or questions that are unanswerable.
And so you use that experience to springboard you into a successful business, meeting up with a couple business partners that helped you start the Barbell Shrugged, and that opened up this podcast world. Where at the time, I'm sure podcasting it's a brand new thing at that point. And now, everybody and their brother has a podcast. We have two idiots right here that are fucking running a podcast,
Yeah.
right?
You give us some time and a mic, and we start talking about fucking random shit.
But it's you use that experience to springboard you into starting this new realm for people to be able to talk and to express, and it's giving people an opportunity to show their areas of expertise. And yours was being a coach and using everything that you learned coaching people. And so talk to us now about how you took that, your experience with Barbell Shrugged and shifted again. You did another, kind of shift in your life, and you started working with people as a coach, and you worked with the Enlifted program. You worked with Training Camp for the Soul. And so how did that, working with the podcast turn into kind of where you are now, and how you kind of shifted your life's work in a couple of different directions from that point?
Yeah, the podcast was, it opened so many doors. And that was the podcast was a huge personal development tool. One of the first things that occurred to me is I'm very spontaneous. My girlfriend would call me impulsive, but I realized that I'm a very honest person. I'm terrible at lying, and the truth wants to come out. And so I realized that there were conversations I was having that I didn't want to have publicly, and there were, there was behaviors I was not proud of, that I wouldn't want to be public. And so instead of continuing the behavior and trying to hide it, I go, you know what? I'm just going to clean it up, and because that way I don't have to worry about it. It's like the same reason I don't lie anymore. It's like lying is just it's the biggest. I'd rather just take one on the chin right now than have to deal with keeping up with whatever story was told. And so, uh, yeah, it really made me an honest person, and also in that commitment to honesty, wanting to be a good person, and so really cleaning up my life in a lot of ways. Um, and then I got to hang out with experts all the time, the people who were the best at what they were doing. And it started with physical fitness and health. And you know what? After a certain point, you realize that, oh, my mindset is impacting my health. It's not just how many sets and reps, and what's actually going on at a deeper level. Oh, there's an emotional aspect of this. Oh, there's a spiritual. Oh, wait, it's all spiritual. And going through these phases of development, and it's like the podcast was me looking for answers. I've got this. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, like I would have identified as a truth seeker. Yeah, I was looking for it. I was looking for answers, and I was going to find the person that had them. And the podcast was just like an excuse to hang out with experts and the people who had figured shit out. And I just went deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole, and I started meeting people who were doing really extraordinary work in the psycho-emotional realm, the spiritual realm. And I started, doing programs and going on retreats where I, had the opportunity to explore these things. I moved to California to be in an environment where I moved into a community where it was a lot of coaches, a lot of personal development coaches, and spent about 5 years in heavy interaction with them, multiple times a week. So like there was just a lot of deep work that was happening over a long time. And I was at the pool this morning with my buddy Dallas, who he lived in the same community I did in Encinitas, California, and we're both part of this men's group here that's just phenomenal. And he we're talking to these other guys, and he's like, man, it's hard to realize how many skills and stuff that we picked up living in that community. It's like, as you're coaching people and helping people, like, oh, I got this for this, and I got this for this, and I got this for this. It's the toolbox is insane. And if you were to ask me, oh, what are all these techniques? I'd go, man, I'd have a hard time listing 5 of them right now. But if I get into coaching 20 different people, you're going to see 30 different techniques used over, a week or so, something like that. And they just flow out. They're integrated at this point.
And as you're watching people do it and seeing them do it at a high level, you're like, huh, that makes sense. Let me like put that into my toolbox that I might be able to pull out and help another person with. You mentioned a lot, Mike, about how, and you talked about it, how the spiritual, the emotional really impacts the physical aspect of it. And one thing that I've loved about your work is that you recognize the impact that trauma has on us physiologically, how it manifests itself in our physical. You're like, if you have a fucking, pain in your shoulder, it's not about that. It's because, your dad left you at preschool when you were 3 years old and didn't pick you up. Like, that's where that fucking pain in your shoulder is coming from. And I'm such a student of how trauma.
It's a compensation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us, like, where did you find that out? Like, who helped you understand that? And then how do you use that to work with people?
I love that question, because the moment that it was a discovery, it wasn't, no one taught me. It was a discovery. And I had a hernia surgery in 2014, something like that, 2014. And then I was drinking ayahuasca in 2015. And and ayahuasca is a very interesting medicine. It does have psychedelic properties, but it's much more than that. And what was happening is I was watching emotional trauma primarily with guilt and shame in my lower gut and my pelvic floor, and it felt like a brick in there, and it would bubble up. I would relive that shameful experience, and then I would purge it into a bucket. I would throw up, and that happened. Like the first few times I purged, I was just like, I was convinced that the shaman had poisoned me, and I had made a mistake by going down to Peru and drinking this strange drink with these people, and curiosity was the thing that got me there. It wasn't I wasn't trying to solve a problem, and I'm having this psychedelic experience, and I'm also purging, and I had done psychedelics before this, and I go, this is different than anything I've experienced before. And then by the 10th time I purge, I realized that I'm purging emotional trauma. I'm purging this stuff that's stuck in my body. And I just remember like every time I would throw up, I threw up maybe 90 times. Like I lost count. Like people at the end of the ceremony were going, who was the lion in the corner roaring all night? Like, oh, that was me. And I remember like the 10th time I started, every time I would purge, it was painful. It was excruciatingly painful because I was also dealing with things that I was avoiding my whole life, things from my childhood. But every time I would purge it out, I would give myself like a little fist pump, like, yeah, fuck yeah, like getting that toxic shit out. And I remember the very next day going out into the grass and sitting down and realizing that I could sit up straight without a problem on the ground. And I had more flexibility in my hamstrings, and my hips, which would get tight, weren't tight anymore. And also remembering that I'd been feeling all this purging coming from my pelvic region and traveling up and out of my mouth. And I was like, holy shit, I was holding that tension down there, and I was like, that's probably what caused my injury. And then after that, I read The Body Keeps the Score, which is a really good book. It's about how trauma is held in the body. Yeah, so if the problem with a lot of people who are trying to deal with trauma is they're trying only talk therapy. Talk therapy is great, but if you're not doing any somatic work, you're really not dealing with the actual like physical manifestation of the trauma, and that's going to cause the trauma to reoccur emotionally. So I had that discovery, but then after having that discovery for years after that, I trained with different coaches who were somatic healers and all this kind of stuff, and they confirmed. They go, oh yeah, I got in conversation. I thought I'd made this huge discovery, and they're like, oh, you're not the first one, buddy. I'm like, cool. It's actually relieving because now I'm not fucking crazy. And then I got to the point where it's how something, you just know it so deeply that it's crazy that it's not obvious to everybody else. That's how I am with this. Is I'm so in touch with that, as like I've just witnessed it in other people. I've watched people's posture change after having emotional releases. Like I'm connected to my emotional body so much that, like my arm is cranky right now from my thumb all the way up through here to here. It doesn't hurt, but I do feel a twinge of tightness, just a little bit. I wouldn't have noticed that a decade ago. I would have just been like, I'm a little sore. I'm a little sore. I mean, I worked out pretty hard this week, but I know I have a little bit of tightness. I'm like, what's that about? And I start bringing curiosity to it, and then I'll realize something, and all of a sudden it'll dissipate. So I'm like, I know that over the weekend I need to probably just sit and meditate for a minute. I'll realize what it is. I'll yawn, I'll burp, whatever it is to release the energy, and then the muscle will relax. I'll be fine.
So that's a truth with a capital T for you.
Yeah.
that is
It's like I know it. I know it. And if someone says, "Oh, I want you to explain it like scientifically," you mean use other people's evidence that they got through like only things that they could, see? Like, no. There's just certain things, it's like gravity. It's like, yeah, I know that I stick to the ground. I don't need a scientist to tell me about it. I know that's yeah, so you may not call it gravity, but you know that, that shit
yeah.
happens.
And it's your experience too. You're trying to explain through someone else's words to make them understand your own experience. So it's like, and I feel like you have to forgive us because we're both ignorant towards like when it comes to plant medicine or ayahuasca. So that's why it's like, we've heard. I feel like that's come up so much with so many people. You know, these experiences that they've had. Like I love hearing that because I'm so fascinated by it, and I really don't know the first thing about it. I hear people's experiences and how it elicits this emotional, deep-rooted response that everyone gets, and everyone has this different response when they do it. It's like I'm kind of curious, like, well, how long does that last? What does it look like? Like, it's just, I'm always curious about that. So I'd love to hear how that kind of works.
A typical ceremony is going to last about 5 hours. The effects can last 24 hours. The heavy effects will last, 2 to 5. But people ask me that question is like, how long does it last? And a lot of times I go, well, that's the duration of the ceremony, but it lasts forever. The Whatever it is that you dealt with in that ceremony is you view the world differently from now on. There's sometimes people have an experience and they go, oh, I hope that, like when I come down from this high that I'm, it's the next day. Like, I hope that when I come off this high, it'll still be special. And I go, yeah, it will be. You go home 3 months later. Yeah, it's just, this is how the world is now.
So while Anthony books a flight to Peru right now, I'll ask you, what's another?
By the way,
Yeah.
if anyone wants a recommendation for where to go without me, there's a place in Costa Rica called Soltara. And if you want to go with me, I'll take you to this really special place in Colombia.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, Anthony's with you right now.
yeah.
Anthony will be at your house tomorrow morning. Just kidding. There'll be some big dude sitting on the front porch with no shoes on.
I'm all in. Yeah. So.
It's unbelievable. So what's another? I just like that's one of your truths with a capital T. Is there another truth that you believe that you know that everybody else should fucking know because that's just the way it is?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, if anyone wants to contact me about that, just DM me. I'll get I got an email list for that shit. Capital T truth. Oh man, everything is spiritual and everything is God. And I had people who were close to me, I grew up with, that are really religious. They stop me and they go, "Man, you're not really living the way that we were taught how to live in church when we were kids." And I go, "You're right." And they're like, "I'm concerned about, your relationship with God." I'm like, "Oh, really? Okay. Let's hear it. What do you got?" And I had this conversation about 6 months ago with a high school buddy, and he's a minister, and he was like really, I could tell he was like, he had to like get his courage to have this conversation with me. And I'm over here laughing and like I almost feel bad for him. And he's like talking about belief in this. Do you believe in that? And I was like, no, I don't have to believe, because I know God. Like I am in this relationship with God, and this is this experience in every moment. And the only thing that gets between me and that experience is my mind. When I get into that space is when I experience that disconnection, that separation. And it's very difficult to put into words, and I don't know if I could say it any better than I've already said it now. It's just I know God, and God is everything, and the stuff that people think that isn't God is.
So how do you
It,
take
it, it,
those? Go ahead, Ant.
no, I was gonna say it's kind of like within us, around us. It's the connection between everything, and like understanding that connection, and like knowing that it's within you and around you, and recognizing that. Like it's just, I don't know. I sort of had that same experience of sort of that realization like that, and you can't put a name to it or a label on it or anything. And to express that in words is virtually impossible. You know, it's very hard to
Yeah.
do.
Well, I think one of the mistakes that people make that makes it difficult to comprehend it is they think that this and this
Right.
isn't a spiritual thing. Like, people go, "Oh, we got the physical world and we got the spiritual world." Like, it's just all spiritual. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
all a
Yeah.
spiritual manifestation. There's a spiritual battle going on in the world right now. There's a lot of things we could point at specifically, say this is wrong or this is good or bad or whatever, but like it's all God figuring things out, and the thing that causes conflict is the trauma that people carry and are unwilling to look at.
This journey that you've taken us on today, Mike. We appreciate just the level of transparency and vulnerability. You just said I just bring it the way it is. I don't have time for that other bullshit. So the journey that you've taken us on now, you've rebuilt yourself a couple different times. You've gone through some crazy fucking shit. You've learned so much about yourself, about the way that you show up in the world, the way that you are for your loved ones, for the people that are counting on you, your clients. How do you take that and work within that strong coach realm? So taking everything that you've learned, what does that look like, the strong coach? I want to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Yeah, the strong coach is a really cool container. Specifically, I started it because I recognized that health and fitness coaches, they learn the psycho-emotional side of things, the better communication, leadership, that they'd get their clients better results. I was witnessing coaches having really poor interactions and not knowing quite how to communicate. And I saw that the things that really leveled me up as a coach most had nothing to do with learning about sets, reps, and proper movement. It had to do with the conversation and really getting into a place of listening with the clients. So that's really what motivated that. Is I saw an opportunity for there to be more of the personal development aspect inserted into the fitness industry. And but and then over time, what's happened is it's turned a lot into business, because what happened is I got my first cohort of students in 3 years ago, and what I learned while teaching them is we got 3 weeks in, I go teaching them all this communication stuff and leadership and visioning and all this that's extremely valuable, but they didn't have any clients, or they were struggling to get clients. And I go, oh, well, we'll just go over marketing next week. You guys need to know more about marketing. So the business has really shifted into, I'm a big fan of just giving the coaches what they need, giving the client what do you need next. All right, we're going to provide you that. So we still teach better than ever. We teach communication, language, the psycho-emotional aspect of things, how to do proper goal setting with your clients, how to create a customer journey for them that's really cool, how to do your marketing, how to manage your money, all this stuff that goes into running a business. And it's a personal development journey. We have a 4-month program that's a personal development journey for the coach themselves. We take them through a transformation, and then we basically say, you know what, everything that you learn from us, bring it into your own practice. You know what, I just steal it. Just take up, because it's about getting as much of the information out as possible that's going to help people. And so I really like using the Strong Coach as a tool for disseminating personal development information into the fitness space, because fitness is in the health space. People are experiencing pain. They want to get better, whether it be emotional or physical, and it's their first step in personal development. I'm not happy with my body. I want it to be different. I want to be out of pain, or I want to be thinner, or I want to whatever it is. I want to be jacked. And now that I've started that, at some point they're going to realize that that's not actually going to make them happy and content with themselves. And they're going to have to go a layer deeper. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just meet people where they're at. Let's bring that conversation to the trainers where people are doing that. That was my first step in personal development, was physical transformation. Let's take that physical transformation and put a psycho-emotional and a spiritual transformation as a part of that. So our program, that's really how it's geared, and that's what people get out of it. And we just finished a cohort, and just getting to listen to all the things they accomplished over the last class was just amazing to hear. And to be able to hear people say, I came into this program so I could make 10K a month as a coach, but I got way more than that. Fuck the money. Like I'm making more money than I ever have before, but like that's pales in comparison to the other things I got from the program. So that's what we do with that program. I love it. It creates a definite picture. It defines like a lot of the stuff that I do into a single focus where people can get the benefit from it. And it's not everything. So there's always more.
Think about, Mike, too, the journey that you've gone on since 2008 when you opened that CrossFit gym and you're like, fuck coach mode, I could give a fuck less. I'm gonna, I have a mattress and a 2x4 hut upstairs, to where you're now coaching coaches. It's, the journey that you've been on has been really remarkable.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's you just saying that and reflecting that, had me go back to that moment, because I don't think about it very often. It's really cool, really, really cool. It's been very challenging, a lot of struggle in there.
And one thing that we've learned
totally
from
worth
you is not, even when it seems like things haven't gone your way, it's not that. It's just you have to kind of take a step back and look at it from a different direction, get in touch with your emotions, your feeling, that spiritual journey that you need to go on, understanding that it's not failure that you've gone through. You might have experienced a setback that makes you feel or attached to some type of an emotion, but it happened to put you in a better spot moving forward.
Absolutely. And Napoleon Hill, he says, it's not a failure, it's temporary defeat. The only failure is the failure to fail. The only failure is failing to try. You're just not even doing it. So I think that's a really great frame for people to operate from who may be afraid of failure.
Yep.
Yeah.
As a reason to not take action.
And I love how I feel like you've been listening to yourself and that voice inside, that inner voice, and following your passions and changing things up and not being afraid, and kind of leaning into that a little bit. And that's what's so cool. And it gives me kind of motivation to continue with what we're doing, because it's scary as hell. I don't know what the fuck we're doing, like we're just sort of going with it, and I love it, and I'm excited, and I'm happy to come in every day, but I have that fire and that passion. I know I have so much resistance, but I almost know that means I'm going in the right direction, because there are things trying to pull me down, and that it's like trying to hold me back, but I'm all in, and I just, you're an inspiration to me when I hear the things that you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mike Bledsoe, where can the Building Men podcast audience find you? How can we get in touch with you?
You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is Mike_Bledsoe. I'll be creating a new YouTube channel and podcast at some point in the next few months. I don't know even what it's going to be called, but if you follow me there, I'll fill you in when it happens. For the coaches out there, go to thestrongcoach.com, and you can scope out what we got going on over there. We have a 2-week free trial inside of our community. No commitment to that. You can hop in, see if it's for you, and if you like it, stick around. If you don't like it, you can bounce.
Brother, any closing words?
No, just want to say thank you, man. It's an honor to meet you in person like this. Or over Zoom, whatever. But this has been great. I really appreciate your time, man. This is awesome.
For sure. My pleasure. I look forward to connecting in person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned right in the beginning, I wrote down the word astrophysicist. You know, you said maybe one day in the future. So in 5 years, when that's part of your journey,
we'll do another interview. Yeah,
coaching astrophysicists on their journey as well. Mike Bledsoe, it's been an absolute honor to have you on the Building Men podcast. Reach us on Building Men, Instagram, building.men, buildingmencoach@gmail.com. We're on everything else. Find us that way. Go a step further than you thought you can go. We'll see you next time on Building Men.